Support for I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere comes from MX Publishing, with the largest catalog of new Sherlock Holmes books in the world. New novels, biographies, graphic novels, and short story collections about Sherlock Holmes. Find them at mxpublishing.com. And from listeners like you, who support us through Patreon. Bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/I Hear of Sherlock. I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, episode 283, Canonical Cornerstones.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became astronomer.
In a world where it's always 1895, it's I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first unofficial consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we interview authors, editors, creators, and other prominent Sherlockians on various aspects of the great detective in popular culture.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Wolder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time!
I'm Bill Curtis. This is I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Now, here are your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Wolder.
All right, always great to be introduced by the lovely Bill Curtis. Thank you very much, Bill. This is Scott Monty.
Oh, well, I guess this must be Bert Wolder.
And
I'm Peter Sagal.
Welcome to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. And Bert, I suppose this is where I ask you if you have your cornerstone canonicalized. Or do you have your canon cornered?
I have my canon fully loaded. I've got to tell you, have you tried recently to go on Amazon and order cannonballs? It turns out that many of the companies that manufacture these things went out of business around 1930.
What?
And yeah. And I ordered a simple number 6 cannonball for that souvenir cannon that we have in the front lawn that I always use to shoot off, at sunset every day, and found out that it's a big deal now.
Well, I think the challenge is, even if you could locate those cannonball manufacturers and you order them on Amazon, you're just going to get pounded with shipping costs.
Well, that's one way to get pounded.
There you go.
Certainly.
Well, we have a wonderful show for you today. We are talking with Peter Eckrich and Rob Nunn about their latest book, Canonical Cornerstones. More about that in a moment. We do have a little bit of a format shakeup, so you will, if you've been listening for years, be prepared to, be shaken up, not stirred. We're just reorganizing a few things, and we thought it might be of interest. And if you would like to support the show in any fashion, we have 2 ways for you to do that. You can do that on Patreon, of course, at patreon.com/I Hear of Sherlock. Also, the link in the show notes. And you can support us at any level there for as little as $1 a month, or select the level that comes with some thank you gifts. That is up to you. Or you could support us on Substack. Also, free and paid options there for subscribing to us on Substack. The paid option will come with bonus content, and you will receive all the same kind of accolades and appointments that our $1 a month and $3 a month supporters over on Patreon receive. So check those out and see what works. And also, while we are into this administrative update, we should note that if you have the latest version of iOS on your iPhone, that is the operating system, 17.4 or later, and you use the Apple Podcast app, that now has transcripts baked right in. So you can follow along and read the show if you need help and see Bert's name and my name misspelled time and again. And see that the Apple transcript service doesn't know that Mycroft is saying, I hear of Sherlock everywhere, since you became his chronicler at the top of the show. So, lots of ways to amuse yourself there.
Wow. Well,
Well, we threatened you with a format shakeup, and here it is. We're actually going to be kicking our shows off with Sherlockian news now. We thought we'd do news at the top of the hour. Do you think we should follow that with traffic on the threes, Bert?
well,
Sports, weather?
no, the weather, I think. I'm always reminded of that old George Carlin line. The sun did not come up this morning, and large rocks are falling out of the sky. More after the sports.
Oh, that's right up there with tonight's forecast. Dark.
Dark. Yes.
With continued dark, turning to widely scattered light toward morning.
Yes.
Well, no, we would like to share with you some tidbits of Sherlockian news. Then we'll get into our interview, and then we'll have, of course, the canonical couplet quiz that you have all been partaking in. So thank you for your participation. So why don't we kick things off with the news?
Yes. Well, the actor Michael Culver died on February 27th, but it was just confirmed. He was 85. Oh. He was most well known for playing a character strangled by Darth Vader in The Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, Admiral Nida.
No, I don't think he was the Unita biscuit. I think it was a different name.
Admiral Nida.
Oh, wait, maybe you're right. Lorth Nida. I think that was his name. But we remember him happily for playing Sir Reginald Musgrave in the Jeremy Brett series.
He really was a good Reginald Musgrave. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, in other news, I guess we could say happier news, we were just treated to a presentation by Terry Hunt about Christopher Morley. We've, of course, discussed Christopher Morley here on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, and Terry actually acknowledged that. We had a nice mention of our podcast in his presentation, but it was given for the Bryant Library in Roslyn, New York, which is where Christopher Morley lived, and it will be available online. During the presentation, Terry shared lots of resources if you would like to learn more about Christopher Morley. And the library itself has a portal, a Christopher Morley portal, where you can read some of Morley's essays, his op-ed pieces, or editorials, I should say. You can listen to some oral histories that relatives of his had partaken in. You can read his correspondence. Lots of great material there from the Bryant Library.
Also, the Beacon Society, which recognizes educators and provides a variety of tools and information to help bring new generations of readers to the world of Sherlock Holmes, has a quiz online available by email from Steve Mason. It's being reoffered as part of the Beacon Society's Fortescue Scholarship Exam Program. And what the quiz is a 100-question Sherlockian quiz, which I'm sure Scott has finished probably while I'm talking. He probably took out his copy, zipped through it. It was written by Elliot Kimball, and it was interestingly originally delivered in the same envelope that carried, now I'm sure, friends, you all know this.
Yes.
If you cast your mind back to September 1964 and you remember opening the envelope with the Baker Street Journal in it, who could forget finding a copy of that 100-question Sherlockian quiz? But it sounds really extraordinary, and I would like to take a look at it, although I don't want to humiliate myself by realizing how few answers I can probably provide to it.
No, I'm sure you would get by with quite a few.
Quite a few.
Quite a few.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we spend every episode of Trifles talking about some of the minutia, so you might be surprised at exactly how many you would get.
Yes. Well, I love a surprise. So send me a copy when you get it from Steve, and we will have a link, I gather, in the show notes so that, so you can obtain this yourselves.
Perfect. Well, speaking of the Beacon Society, they are the place to go if you would like to find out about Sherlockian societies. For years, Peter Blau's list of societies, both alphabetical and geographical, were contained on Sherlocktron. Well, Sherlocktron is no more. Willis Frick has retired the site, and others at the Beacon Society have taken on the duty of updating the list. But they've done it, this is really neat, Mike McSwiggan has done it via creating an interactive map of all of the active geographical societies. So you can look around, zoom in, zoom out, etc., and check out all of the active societies. If you're curious, there are 477 active Sherlockian societies, and there are a total of 987 listed. So it looks like about half of them are active at this point.
Well, we need to increase that number. And friends, if you have not formed your own science society this week, now is a perfect time, because I would like to see that number of 477 get up at least to 500. All we need is another 23. And at the rate of one per week, we should be, by late summer celebrating. And we need to get to a total of 1,000 societies.
Oh, we could do that easily.
So, let's get moving.
Pretty good opportunity for us to plug a former episode from season 10. We did an episode called Sociable and Clubbable. That is episode 110. So check that out from, looks like it was from January 30th of that year.
And staying with the Beacon Society, there is a 2024 R. Joel Center Senior Memorial Essay Contest. It's open for students in grades 4 through 12. And quick, the deadline for submissions is April 1.
Oh, boy.
And we will have a link for that in the show notes. It's at the Beacons, or you can go yourself to beaconsociety.com. Joel Center Essay Contest with some dashes in there between the words. Find out more. But it's for students in grades 4 through 12, and the deadline is April 1.
All right. And, there's so many things to update you on here. Let's just kind of wrap it up with this one. For those who are interested in more Sherlock Holmes on television, we have mentioned in passing that CBS is doing a show called Watson by the creator of Elementary. But now, according to Variety magazine, David Thewlis is going to star as Sherlock Holmes in Sherlock and Daughter on the CW channel. And Blue Hunt will play his daughter Amelia. And don't miss out on Doug Ray Scott as Moriarty. So we'll have more information about that series as it gets closer to airing.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should close up the old mailbag here, and we'll see you on the other side of the news anthem. If you aren't yet signed up for email updates from MX Publishing, well, you're missing out. There are lots of freebies available for fans of MX Publishing that come out regularly. Every Friday, Steve MX sends out Thank Holmes It's Friday. And the latest one has top picks of 2023. If you use the code 2023 at checkout, you'll be able to get a discount on some of these titles. And if you sign up for the email updates, you'll also have access to audio codes for free audiobooks from MX Publishing. Titles like Sherlock Holmes, The Coronet Conspiracy by James Patrick Heatherly, The Selected Cases of Dr. Watson by Martin Daly, and Sherlock Holmes and the Adventure of the Bedeviled Foot by Thomas Kent Miller. Also, you'll be the first to know about new titles as they're released in 2024. Titles like The Devil at Prayers by Elora Lawthorne, Sherlock Holmes and the Barnyard Caper by Danielle Calloway, Sherlock Holmes Eliminate the Impossible by Paula Hammond, and Sherlock Holmes 5 Miles of Country by Gretchen Altebeff. Make sure you're signed up for email updates from our friends at MX Publishing. Just go to mxpublishing.com and register today. Peter Eckrich is the co-editor of the Finest Assorted Collection with Rob Nunn. He started attending Sherlockian functions as a child thanks to his father, Joe Eckrich. When he's not hanging out in bookshops, he's a 5th grade teacher at Edgar Road Elementary in Webster Groves, Missouri. He enjoys spending his time with his wife and his daughter in St. Louis. Peter's a collector of books, autographs, and other things he can spend his money on. He's a member of the Parallel Case of St. Louis, the Illustrious Clients, the Tankerville Club, and the Occupants of the Empty House. He's written for the Sherlock Holmes Review and has been published in Irregular Adventures of Sherlock Holmes in Belanger Books. Rob Nunn is the Gassagene of the Parallel Case of St. Louis and a member of many other Sherlockian groups. He also serves as the headlight of the Beacon Society. Rob's the co-editor of the Finest Assorted Collection with Peter and the Monstrum Opus of Sherlock Holmes with Brad Kefauver, and is the author of The Criminal Mastermind of Baker Street and The Commonplace Book. His interviews with fellow Sherlockians can be found on his blog Interesting Though Elementary. Rob is also a 5th grade teacher in Edwardsville, Illinois, where he lives with his wife and daughter. Peter and Rob, welcome back to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
It's good to be here.
Yes, thank you.
You guys are regulars. Peter, you've been with us once before on episode 244 with Rob. I think that's the time we were talking about the Finest Assorted Collection. And yes. Rob, you are an old hat at this. You've been on, 4 times other than that. So this is your 6th appearance. And for all of the Rob Nunn fans listening out there, and Peter Eckrich fans, we will have links to their episodes in the show notes if you'd like to go back and see what else they were up to. So, guys, Canonical Cornerstones. What was the movement behind this? What made you decide that you needed to write a book about these 17 volumes?
Well, we wanted to do canonical couplets, but that had already been taken.
Well, then you'd have to bring in Bert for all the wrong answers.
Oh, yeah. It's a pleasure to listen to every week. Well, Peter and I had so much fun doing the previous anthology, like you mentioned, the Finest Assorted Collection, that we thought, okay, so what's next? And next time, let's not make it so big, because we had 27 authors last time. And, man, you want to talk about corralling a bunch of cats. But so we thought, let's pick a canonical number. 17 seemed to be a pretty good fit. The 17 steps up to Baker Street. And
you didn't want to do 140?
Thought about it. But there's only so many people that want to write. So we kind of kicked around, what is the next idea? Because our first book was all about what specific areas people collected, and a natural fit was, well, we all have libraries. We all have our books. So that was the idea, and we kind of took it from there.
Well, how did you What came first, the titles or the authors? How did you decide on the focus? I mean, there's been so much written about Sherlock Holmes, and there you could have so many things. Look at the anthologies like, The Great Game that went all the way back to Ronald Knox and before. So how did you, what was the process you went through that sort of focused on these titles? And then did that come before you then found the authors, or did you find people who said, I'd like to write about this or that?
Well, we started brainstorming titles of books, that we thought would fit this anthology. And then, Rob, I think it was Rob's idea. Rob said, let's send out some surveys. Let's put it out to people, to Sherlockians, and get their feedback. What do they consider must-have books to be in their library? And you notice we didn't say collection necessarily, because what we wanted to do was also kind of make sure that we were picking things, or we were having titles chosen that people could find. It wasn't the rarest thing ever. It's not about the most expensive, but really about the most useful, the most informative. And so we did a bunch of surveys, and we heard from Sherlockians, which I thought was really great. And then as we started to put a list of authors together, what we found was that people were very passionate about certain titles. People were like, this has to be, and they give great reasons why. So they kind of just naturally matched up authors to the titles.
Well, that's neat, because, you could make the case for many people to say, oh, I love my, annotated Sherlock Holmes, whether it's the Baring Gould or the Klinger. But there are so many other titles, perhaps that we've grown up with, perhaps that a Sherlockian mentor introduced to us. So I think what fascinated me was how each of these authors kind of elucidated what their tie to that particular book was and why they chose it.
Yeah, and I really appreciated that some of these people had personal connections to the books that they were writing about. Mark Alberstadt wrote about From Holmes to Sherlock by Matthias Bostrom, and they worked together on the newspaper series. And Mark even said, when I reached out to him, he said, just so you know, I know Matthias pretty well. And we said, yeah, we want it. We want you to come in fully biased for the book that you say is great. We want you to have that deep connection. We're not looking for some cold, dry, this is important because of this checklist. We want people to know the love and the work behind that went into creating these books as well.
How did the end result stack up against your own personal sense of foundational canonical texts? Was there anything that you were surprised that missed?
I don't know if I was surprised anything was missed. I think that there's so much out there that there's still things that, just because it's not in this book or someone, people did not necessarily vote for it, doesn't mean that it doesn't have a place in a Sherlockian library, or that it's not important or informative and you can't, it's still something that you could learn from. So I want to, be clear on that, because there's so many great books out there. But I think, narrowing it down, as Rob had previously said, is part of the fun, right? Because then you open yourself up to, you're putting out this book, it's going to cause debate, it's going to spark conversation, which is part of what we wanted to do. We wanted people to sit around and be like, hey, why wasn't this included? Or I think this should have been, or I agree with this one, but not this one, because it gets people talking about Sherlock Holmes. At the end of the day, that's what it does. It gets people talking about Sherlock Holmes. And for younger Sherlockians, newer Sherlockians, it kind of gives some ideas of, there's so much out there. So, if I only have a limited budget, what are some things that maybe I should pick up to focus on? And for, veteran Sherlockians, we hope that it's a good revisit to a lot of these books. And maybe they pick up something new that they didn't know before.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think it's a fabulous book, and it's invaluable for people new to this area of interest. And one of the lovely things about it is the resulting blend, because it's interesting to hear you talk about the survey and the votes and so on. And when I say blend, I mean you have a pastiche here, like the 7% solution, which Anastasia Klimchinskaya writes about. And you also have two different annotated, not annotated, but two different collections of the cases, the Doubleday and the Baring Gould. But you've got things like S.C. Roberts and Michael Harrison, and all of these are favorites of mine. And then, how do you choose just one biography of Conan Doyle? Well, I think Dan Stashower is my own vote for the best. So it's a lovely mosaic that you've put together here. And I was so pleased to see Ellery Queen's Misadventures of Sherlock Holmes on the list too, because that's another favorite of mine. So I think that the collective community of Sherlockians has done really well in indicating their own recommendations here.
Yeah, and I appreciate that the results came in so far ranging. Like you said, I mean, everybody's going to say Baring Gould, Doubleday, Les Klinger, it's annotated. Those are all important to have. But some things like, the Apocrypha, the fact that Ross Davies was able to say, okay, let's collect these specific things, and we're going to quote unquote call this the Apocrypha for this essay, because there's so much disjecta membra out there, small pieces that aren't totally collected. And is some of it worth reading? Maybe once. Is it worth owning? I don't know. But I think he makes a strong argument for, hey, these specific pieces that don't fit in the 60 stories of the canon, these are worth having on your shelves, and why they're worth having.
Yeah, and I think that goes to Bert's point about this mosaic, is that we're not all in one area of Sherlockiana. There's stories, there's pastiches, there's scholarship, a whole variety of things here. So maybe turning a little more personally for each of you, were there any books that you expected to make this list that didn't, or any books that you would prefer to have included from your personal preferences?
I don't know if I was really surprised by anything that was left off. If you would have asked me, I would have said, Baring Gould is annotated, Klinger's annotated, and From Holmes to Sherlock. Those would be my top three picks, and those were the ones that got the most votes. From my own personal collection, not off the top of my head. I mean, I have books that are important to me for sentimental value, but would I argue that they need to be in every Sherlockian library just because, a friend of mine gave it to me? I don't think about that that way.
What's one of those sentimental ones?
Oh, I have, the BSI version of the Blue Carbuncle that came out. Mm-hmm. That was lovely. Brad Kiefhofer's given me a couple copies of the original Strand. I mean, they're falling apart, but I love that I own some of these. Do I think everybody needs those specific copies in their library? Probably not, but I hope everybody has something in their library that has personal connections to them.
How about you, Peter?
I think it's interesting. I'll tell you a quick story is that when I first started getting into Sherlock Holmes, more than just reading the stories, so into like the commentary and the writings about the writings. Like one of the first books my father gave me was D. Martin Dakin's Sherlock Holmes commentary. And he stressed, how great this book is and how important this book is. And so it was kind of neat to see that other people really share that same view with him. And maybe my father knows what he's talking about. I'm not sure some days, but
I won't tell him you said that.
No, not at all. But it's, that I thought that was neat, that here is this book that's sitting on my shelf that he gave me, and it really, really is an important book. I thought, just with people commenting, I thought it would go like one way or the other, where it would either be books that have been around for 50, 60 years, a bunch, or books that have been all new within the last, 10, 15 years. And really, people came back with a wide range of books. And I thought that was particularly interesting. I don't know if there's anything I would say it's missing. I mean, I'm a Morley fan, so, I thought there would be more of a push for something that he wrote, but not particularly. That's about it.
One of the things that's really fun about this book, Canonical Cornerstones, is not only looking over the titles and having at your hand this guide to these essential books for Sherlockian interest, but peering through the eyes of the authors to see what they made of them, And the interesting thing that I found too, when I looked at the table of contents, was that one of the books is not a book. It's the Baker Street Journal. And when you look at the essay about the Baker Street Journal by Peggy McFarland, you see her description of the richness of the topics covered in the journal over a series of years. And also you get her thoughts about the importance of research and Sherlockian scholarship. And that's the kind of commentary that really enriches your understanding of the journal. But if you are sort of new to this, it's an idea. It's a point of view that you're not going to find anywhere else. And so I thought that was really, a lovely little discovery. And there are lots of these discoveries in here through the way, as you go through it.
Yeah, and Peggy did such an amazing job. I mean, how do you take, decades of a quarterly journal and turn it into a 3,000-word essay saying, hey, here's a pitch on why you should like it and why you should subscribe to it and try to get some back issues without, I appreciate the way she took it. Here are some random issues I just happened to pull off, and there's gold nuggets in every piece. There, everything's a hit. I would say she probably had the most daunting of all the essays to tackle.
Well, yeah, and when you think about it, that's a microcosm of this book itself, because you could take any one of these 17 titles off of the shelf, and there is some wonderful charm or delight or information to be conveyed that I don't think you can go wrong, and for new Sherlockians, for first-time Sherlockians who may have only read a handful of the stories. Maybe they haven't read any of the stories yet because they came through Elementary or the BBC series or this podcast. Who knows? For them to have this as a guidebook as to how to make their journey through this perhaps new and confusing world to them, I think this is a public service, what you've done here.
Yeah, I like the fact, thinking of how different readers could approach this essay collection. You talk about newer Sherlockians. I remember, being that guy years and years ago. I'd finished the canon, and then I read the Apocrypha, and I tried some pastiches, but, some hit, some didn't. But then you realize there's so much scholarship out there, and, it's like trying to drink the ocean. Where do you start? Do you start with the new stuff? Do you start with the old stuff? And I really like that some of the older stuff is specifically highlighted. Like, who can argue with the fact that, the private life of Sherlock Holmes should be in this collection? And, everybody knows Ray Betzner pours his heart into his Vincent Sterrett writing. And, Profile by Gaslight by Dan, the essay on Profile in Gaslight by Dan Andriacco, like they just hold up these two early pieces of Sherlockiana that's important to people. But then also on the flip side, you could have something like From Holmes to Sherlock, which came out, just a few years ago, and say, hey, no matter where you want to jump into this hobby or fandom or whatever you want to call it, there's really good stuff all throughout the years to read.
Yeah, and kind of continuing in that vein, this breadth of view, you think about Peter Blau, right? Who was there nearly at the beginning, and his essay says, one of the nicest things about being the 2,000-year-old Sherlockian is being able to say, I was there when. So he's seen this arc of creativity and scholarship over the many years. And in fact, he was, side by side with John Bennett Shaw. And of course, Shaw had that famous list, the Shaw 100, that were the essential books every Sherlockian should have. And as you said before, a lot of those are unattainable for some people. They're collector's items now. They're not readily available. So in engaging Peter, and Peter selecting the modern annotated Sherlock Holmes, not the Baring Gould one, but the new one, I think that speaks volumes to how we as fans, as Sherlockians, continue to evolve with the content as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it is interesting, with Peter writing that article, that essay, is because it also shows something about Sherlockians, I think, too, is that Sherlockians, they're continuously willing to, whatever comes out, if it's good quality items, they want to read it. It doesn't matter. They're not set in where I can only read, nothing great's been published in 10 years. It's not like that. Sherlockians want to continue to learn. They want to continue to discuss, and it just doesn't stop.
Wouldn't it be something if Canonical Cornerstones becomes the next Canonical Cornerstone?
Yeah, that would be good. Now, here's a question that I'm really interested in your answer. Did putting this book together cause you to go out and read something you hadn't read before, or were all of these familiar to you too? Or did you go back and reread anything?
I did go back and reread things because after reading some of these essays, I was like, I need to check this out again. I'm trying to look through it, but just the Catherine Cook's, Ray. I love Vincent Sterrett, and Ray Betzner. Anytime he talks about Vincent Sterrett, writes about Vincent Sterrett, it just makes you want to pick up Vincent Sterrett again. It doesn't matter how many times you read it; it just makes you want to pick it up. And what Rob had mentioned Dan earlier, Draco. I still have Dan's email where we asked him to be a part of this. And he said, he's so busy, and he is. He's such a busy guy. He's got so many things going on, obviously, but he's so passionate about, excuse me. He's so passionate about it, about Profile by Gaslight, that he just couldn't not write it, and that just made me want to pick it up again. It's like when people are passionate about stuff, it just and maybe it's the teacher in me. I know Rob's very similar. It just makes you want to pick it up again, and let's read it. Let's discuss it.
Yeah, I am not a big Doylean. I mean, I appreciate the man. I appreciate his Sherlockian writing, but there's so many biographies out there about him. I'd kind of taken a stance of like, I'm just gonna put my head in the sand and pretend that I don't have to choose. Mark Jones's article on Teller of Tales, Dan Stashauer's biography, totally won me over. And after, not while we were editing the book, because that was a little too much going on all at once. But once we had put the project to bed, I did go back and check that book out. And, everything Mark said rang true. It is just beautiful, beautiful writing. But on the flip side, some of these pieces reminded me of where I was when I first read these books. The article on Sherlock Holmes for Dummies, which what a title for a book for us to put in here. Like, hey, here's some books everybody should read, you dummies. I can remember being on a road trip, actually going to my first Sherlockian conference at Dayton, reading that book along the way, and just boring my poor wife to tears the whole way across the state. I was like, did you know this? And she's like, I can't wait to drop you off and get away from you for 2 days.
That's fantastic. Well, this may seem a little unusual, but of this assembly of essays, I'd like to turn to the foreword. You managed to secure Michael Dirda, of all people, speaking of breadth of knowledge and breadth of coverage, to write the foreword. And he sums it up. He says, in fact, nearly all the essays you're about to encounter conform to Horace's famous phrase, they are dulce et utile, both charming and useful. And then Dirda goes on not only to continue to compliment some of the books that were mentioned here, but then he goes on to recommend some other books. So if you read the foreword carefully, you actually have additional canonical cornerstones from the pen of Michael Dirda.
In which I believe he slides in a nice little plug for his own book at one point. And I don't think anybody can fault the man for it because his book is great as well. But when we were talking about this project, we said, we were lucky enough to get Rebecca Romney to write the foreword for our previous book. And we said, okay, that's just become a thing that we do now, I guess. And we said, well, who should write about books? And I mean, Michael Dirda writes about books for a living, and we were just over the moon when he was very happy to do the whole thing, and lovely guy to work with.
Well, before you ask, Bert and I would be delighted to write the next foreword to your next book.
Yeah, I have to sit Rob down, and we have to discuss,
Do you guys have another?
It's good to know you guys are on board.
Well, thanks. But do you have another project in mind?
I'm going to let Rob answer that.
That is the $1 million question. I got to tell you, between Peter and our publisher, Stephen Doyle, these two guys were like, okay, so what's next? The book came out at the BSI weekend in January, and I don't think I had been sitting at the table for 30 minutes before Steve started asking me about the next project. And he was weeks and weeks behind Peter asking about what we were going to do next. So, in fact, actually, I have my book here, my own copy. Let me read you the inscription from my co-editor. Rob, always a blast working with you. Let's make it 3. So now that it's in writing, I guess we're going to do a trilogy for sure.
Nice.
I mean, I'm not going to say all trilogies are great, but, I'm just going to throw out there some great trilogies. And I love working with Rob. We have so much in common. Between being teachers and dads and Sherlockians, and so it's great. It's working with a friend, and that just makes it that much more fun.
So you've gone from the first volume where you worked with 27 authors?
Yes.
This one has 17. Well, the next one has to have 7.
It sure will be a whole lot less emails, I can tell you that.
Yes.
And if that's the case, Peter would then get so many less texts from me like, hey, have we done this? What about this? Do we need to take care of this?
Well, I'm the big idea guy, and Rob is the nuts and bolts.
It is so helpful to have somebody like that around, Peter, let me tell you.
I am a picker of nits, that is for sure.
Yeah. So is this the kind of thing where the two of you have enough ideas to bat around, or are you taking recommendations or requests?
I think it's yes to both.
Okay. Well, you heard it, folks. If you've got ideas for Peter and Rob for their next volume, first volume talked about collecting. This talks about what should be in a Sherlockian's library. Just think about that. Hit them up.
Feel free to email Peter Eckrich at...
Well, you can email us here.
All emails.
Yeah, you can email us here at I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Comment at IHearOfSherlock.com, and we will forward that any of the recommendations to both of these fine gentlemen. Well, where will we see the two of you on the road next?
I can't speak for Peter. I am going to attend my first 221 BCon in Atlanta next month.
Ooh.
And we'll be heading up to Minnesota for their conference this summer. Very excited for both of those.
Yeah, I'm going to Minnesota as well. I'm going to travel with my dad and it should be a great time. I'm trying to convince my daughter, who is going to be 10. I'm like, you should come with me.
Oh.
But I have not been successful yet.
There's time. There's time. Let Grandpa work on her.
Does she know about the Mall of America?
Well, no, not. You know what? That's a good point. She loves shopping. Grandpa does work on her every Friday. Grandpa comes down to put her on the bus and try to discuss with her Sherlock Holmes. So he's doing his part.
Excellent. Well, and so are you guys. Peter Eckrich and Rob Nunn, authors of Canonical Cornerstones, foundational books of a Sherlockian Library. Everyone should pick this up from Wessex Press and Gasogene Books, $24.95. It is well worth the investment of your money and of your time. And speaking of investment of time, thank you both for taking the time to be with us here on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much.
This really is a wonderful addition to the Rob Nunn and Peter Eckrich line of books, which it seems like it's going to be, at least one more. The first sort of, I guess, in this series was the Finest Assorted Collection, which is about collecting Sherlock Holmes. And this is about really thinking about and learning about Sherlockiana and Holmesiana, about the foundational books in a Sherlockian library. But that gets you to the question that they asked, which is, what's a reasonable final punch here in Act 3?
Do you have any ideas?
Good topic. Well, I think it'll be the third one. I'm pretty sure that Peter and Rob are going to edit it. There are going to be a number of writers. It's not going to be about collecting or scholarship.
Yeah.
And that leaves, well, of course, it's obvious. I don't want to insult your intelligence by not.
Well, I've got an idea, actually.
Oh, what is it?
So the first book was about things, right? Collecting things, collections. The second was about books, which is, a natural term for Sherlockians. But maybe the third should be about the people themselves, right? From things to books to people. These are, kind of the triumvirate of things that attract so many of us to this hobby. And just after we wrapped, we were talking with Peter in particular about generations of Sherlockians. Wouldn't it be interesting for them to do a survey, not a survey instrument, but discussions with many generational Sherlockian families?
Well, that's a great idea. I
don't know if there's enough there or not, but
yeah. Very good.
Oh boy, we all know what that means. It means it's time for everyone's favorite Sherlockian quiz show. That's right, it's Canonical Couplet, where we give you 2 lines of poetry and ask you to come up with what Sherlock Holmes story we're talking about. Our friends, we have Bert Wolder with us here, who is
Where?
often wrong, but never uncertain, and we love that about him.
Often wrong, but never right.
That's true. Often wrong, never right. But if you were around here last time, you recall we gave you this clue. To trust a man inclined to laugh and fidget may mean the loss of an important digit. Hey, Bert.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you know which Sherlock Holmes story we're talking about?
Yeah, of course I do. It's a case that we actually mentioned earlier in the program. It's the case where Holmes finds that his only friend at college has a family recipe for a strange old English condiment. It's the case Watson called the mustard victual.
Wow. No.
I like that sound effect.
You like that one? We'll be starting up the old Maxwell after the show, taking a spin around the block. That is not what we were looking for, unfortunately, Bert. But
what?
No, it's crazy, right? Thankfully, our good friend Eric Deckers is here to the rescue, and he admits this one was particularly tough because I thought it was a story about how Holmes lost a young woman's phone number. But actually, it was the story of a pirate who went to the dentist and received too much Novocaine. It's the story Watson called The Buccaneer's Numb.
Oh, that's cute. I like that.
That's a good one. From Florida resident Eric Deckers. Well, no, he said that's not it. It's probably more like the engineer's thumb. Oh. Yes, that's exactly right, Eric. So, looks like we had quite a few people participate. Although it was tricky, we still did have a number of correct answers. So, let's bring out the prize wheel and give it a big spin. And it's slowing down, coming to rest on number 4. Wow, a low number this time. And that looks like it is John Bergquist. Hooray! Oh, thank you for participating, John. Let's see, what do we have for John? Do you remember what our prize was last time, Bert?
No, I do not remember. I can say with some confidence that I do not remember what our prize was.
Yeah, I can't even get you to answer the canonical couplet correctly. So, well, we talked to Bev Woloff about the history of the women last time. So, were we going to send John a pair of pantyhose? What was the...
No.
Let me see. I think we had an extra copy of the... That's what it was, an extra copy of the 2022 Baker Street Journal Christmas Annual. Women on the Periphery of the BSI. Well, there you go, John.
Well, that's nice.
I'm sure you already have a copy of that, but maybe you can share it with someone in your circle of Sherlockian friends. It's always a welcome thing to do. Pay it forward. Well, we do have another canonical couplet ready for you, so let's get right to it with this clue. When days grew dark for luckless Hector John, the woodpile shed its lurid light thereon. If you know the answer to this canonical couplet, put it in an email addressed to comment@ihearofsherlock.com with canonical couplet in the subject line. If you are among all of the correct answers and we choose your name at random, you'll win. Good luck. All right, and we do have a copy of Canonical Cornerstones for this episode's winner. Always a good thing.
Very good.
Yeah.
Now we have to remember that for the next episode.
I'm going to write it down right now and then misplace the note.
Good.
Just so everyone remind me where I put the note, and then we'll have it.
It's over there.
Yes, we are so well organized around here.
Superb.
All right, Bert. Well, we will be talking again in just a couple of weeks. Until then, I remain the ultimately cornered Scott Monty.
And I must be around the stone around your neck. I'm Bert Wolder.
You're no albatross, I'll tell you that.
Well, then together we say...
The game's afoot.
The game's afoot.
You know, I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I'm neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye.
And good luck. And believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.